Welcome to On the Level, broadcasting from the Blue Ocean Network studios here in Beijing. My name is Fergus Thompson. Now, China's myriad contributions to the general store of world culture can't be denied, but for better or for worse, bar culture is not one of them. Indeed, the idea is somewhat alien here, where social intercourse tends to revolve more around the tea house or the restaurant. And despite those images of a wild nightlife in Shanghai in the 1930s, several decades of austere communist rule meant that when the first Westerners returned to cities like Beijing in large numbers, they didn't even find a bar, never mind a bar scene. But 2 short decades later, cities like Beijing and Shanghai boast hundreds of bars ranging from cheap dives to elegant and pretty pricey cocktail bars, many of them run and established by foreigners. Well, to indulge in a little bit of bar talk about this Western lifestyle import, what it means to China and how it's developing, I'm delighted to be joined today by a Canadian entrepreneur in this area who has set up and run not just 1, but 2 such establishments in the capital here, Beijing. Trevor Metz, welcome to On the Level.
Thank you much.
Now, obviously, Trevor, you weren't born a barman, you didn't grow up a barman. In fact, you're a journalist by training. So how does a journalist become a barman in Beijing?
Well, I think you have to like the industry to begin with. And pub culture is something that I kind of grew up with in Canada. But as you were saying, I was a journalist by trade. That's what I went to school for. And I was in it for a long time, and I did quite well in it, actually, both in Canada, here, and China as well. But I was stuck in a thing here where I was working for state-run media all the time. I was working with CRI, China Radio International. I ran their Olympic coverage at the time, which was a real treat, and it was interesting. I worked for CCTV, which is quite possibly the worst job I've ever had. So I wanted to I was working for Global Times as well, and I just needed...
That's a newspaper.
That's a newspaper, yeah. And I begged them, I pleaded with them not to put me in the political or opinion section, and of course they put me right in the opinion section, and I couldn't take it. I just couldn't handle working for state-run media, so I thought, what do I know? Other than journalism, I didn't really know a whole lot, but I knew I enjoyed bar culture, and I enjoyed restaurants and food and drink, and the service industry, I guess. At least being on one side of it, so I decided to try being on the other side of the bar for a change.
So let's try to give people some sort of an idea of what the bar scene is like in Beijing. So we've got, say, let's take Mr. Smith, arrives on a flight in Beijing airport, gets a taxi into town, it's a bad flight, he needs a drink. What's he going to find? Well,
he's going to find a lot. But let's start maybe with the evolution of the bar scene. First of all, you have to understand how it sort of started. And back in the day, it was easy money. Because there, as you said in the beginning, there wasn't really much of a bar scene. So you could pretty much throw up anything you wanted, throw on some beer or whatever horrible food on the menu, and it made you millions because it was so unique and it was new and there was nowhere else to go. And then you saw the progression of what's happened, and it's become incredibly quickly an advanced bar scene, almost, it's a complex bar scene now. You have everything. You have those high ends, as you were saying, and you still have your dive bars, and there's a place for everything in between. So it depends on what he's looking for, because he can find it all here in Beijing now.
Is there still that phenomenon that exists in many Asian countries, many Asian cities, where you have a designated bar area and foreigners who come into the city or travelers are sort of told, here you go here, and the taxi driver knows that and he leaves you off?
It was almost like zoning. They basically put together an area called Sanlitun, and I'm sure if anybody has watched your program, I'm sure you've mentioned Sanlitun at some point, either for shopping or development, and it's an area where they decided this is where it's going to be the entertainment area of Beijing. And it's still that way, even from when they first decided. You have pockets, neighborhood bars and things like that, whether you're out in Shuni or if you're out, I'm in Xuanjing or wherever you happen, Wangjing, wherever, Lidu. Those are pockets, but really the main entertainment area is right around Sanlitun in the center of town.
But it is something that's expanding and changing all the time, as you said.
It is. It's evolving. Where people move, you're going to see more and more places. Xuanjing 5 years ago, when I first started, was quite a small little neighborhood, and now it's turned into quite a large neighborhood with a large number of expats and a large number of Chinese, of course, that want to have that entertaining experience in their backyard instead of having to go somewhere like Sanlitun and battling traffic.
This is not innate in Chinese culture by any means. Drinking, yes, but a pub, as it would be understood in the West, is not something that people were used to here.
Yeah, again, from 10 years, I've seen it expand and more. Before it was unique, for instance, a Western-style pub. where you would see a few Chinese that were curious about what was going on inside and things like that. But now, I mean, they're well versed in how these things work, and I would say at least 40 to 50% of my patrons are Chinese.
So it's not an expat-dominated scene as
Not
it was
anymore.
10 years ago?
Not even close, no.
And that goes both for bar owners and the clientele?
Well, it depends, again, if you're in China in different areas. Shanghai is still booming with foreigners. Shenzhen, Guangzhou, same sort of thing. Beijing, you're seeing an exodus of foreigners. I don't care what the statistics will tell you. I know as for beer sales and for regulars and customers and things like that, you're seeing foreigners flee the city of Beijing and they're not being replaced. So my regulars are leaving and they're not being replaced by other foreign regulars. But you are seeing more and more Chinese come in and take up that role as patrons and regular customers. In any business, if you cater to the Chinese, you're going to do better. I personally don't want to work in the full Chinese atmosphere because there's difference in drinking cultures. For instance, you can't spit seeds on my floor. Like, you just can't. You can't. Sometimes, and I'm not saying it all the time, but occasionally, sometimes when drinking, a lot of the Chinese, if they're spending a lot of money, they feel quite like they own you. Like, you're serving me now. Like, I won't respond to people snapping their fingers and yelling for service.
Which is a cultural norm, just to explain, in a restaurant.
Right, in a restaurant, exactly. It's funny that my wait staff, and again, I'm not trying to lay any blame, it's just it's cultural differences. They prefer generally talking to Westerners or dealing with Westerners because they say, wow, they really treat us with respect. Because back home, if you treat your waitress with disrespect, it's highly looked down upon. Whereas here,
even
I still
if you fail
think
to tip, it's highly
well, yeah, okay, that part of it I actually quite like because you don't have to tip here, which is nice. But I think my wait staff appreciates some of the Western elements that have been brought in pub culture.
Well, looking more at the actual running of one of these establishments, and you've got quite a bit of experience in this. Let's go back to Mr. Smith. He comes back. He likes his experience.
I like Mr. Smith.
Right. He heads back home and he comes back and he says, I'm going to head back to Beijing. He gets off the plane and he wants to set up a bar in Beijing. What challenges await him? How easy is it? How difficult is it?
Well, China is, I think, ranked by the IMF something like 139th in the world for starting up a business as a foreigner. And that's not good. And there is a tremendous amount of red tape and bureaucracy to go through. And that's something that needs to be worked on, I think, personally, and it would be advantageous to the entire country by making these steps much simpler.
Are you talking specifically now about that business, setting up
I'm saying almost
bar?
any business. It's really difficult as a foreign-owned enterprise to get going. Just to get your WOFE, or your wholly owned foreign enterprise license, it's an amazingly difficult step to get. You generally have to partner with Chinese, and some industries that's still the case. Bars and restaurants, it's not, but things go so much easier if you do. But then again, you run into that problem when there's no real rule of law in China when it comes down to these things, and as a foreigner, you're probably going to lose if you get into a court case.
So you've come across horror stories of where people have partnered up in the beginning?
I lost my first bar because I was married to a Chinese woman, and lovely girl still, but when it came down to doing business, she got the business because we put everything in her name because it's just so much easier than trying to go with my name on everything. Therefore, I lost out, and that's a lesson that I've learned quite well.
Right. This would apply to anybody setting up with any partner here, whatever.
You have to be very careful. And again, and this is one of the biggest problems. And it's not like this is breaking news, but the rule of law here is really difficult. And you don't get your fair shake as a foreigner generally.
Would that also apply to, to Chinese partners who fall out? Surely the same thing. It's going to depend not on the rule of law, but also on who they tend to know. Or...
and then that does help, right? I mean, Guanxi does help. I mean, it's not everything, but it certainly does help. If you know somebody in high situations, they can make roads clear for you. But for somebody like you or I, if we want to start up a business, it makes it that much more difficult because we don't know anybody. Language is also a big thing, and I'm guilty of this. I should know the language a lot better than I do. Therefore, I have to rely on people, and I've got to take a lot of responsibility sometimes for problems that occur because of my inability to speak the language well.
So you have these legal problems with getting your actual paperwork and everything, right?
Well,
is this...
you will go back, Fergus, 3 or 4 times to the same office, and they will have, they'll say, this is all you need, this is all you need. And you keep coming back and they'll say, oh yeah, but you need this as well. And they'll send you off in a different train. And you'll come back 5 or 6 times and you'll just go, why didn't you tell me this the first time? I could have gotten everything. It's just frustrating. And you don't know why it's like this. And you've lived here for quite some time, you just don't ask why, you just got to keep moving through the system.
So is it not sometimes easier here, that you can actually, you can't go around those laws in Canada? In China, that's a possibility.
Right. Everything's sort of gray here, and that's where a guy like me could generally start a business, and so I shouldn't complain too much in the sense that it took me a lot less money and a lot less aggravation in some ways to open up a business. But then again, my business can get closed down just as easy, whereas in Canada, you can't just walk in and arbitrarily close something because you didn't get a discount from the owner.
You're employing Chinese staff very often, people who come from outside Beijing. Do you have a high turnover? Is it easy to get staff? Is this a real problem?
In this industry it is, because you don't pay them that much. You pay them...
Maybe you should pay them more.
Well, that actually doesn't generally help. Usually they're younger, they're transient a bit, a lot of them are in school and they want a part-time job. I tend to do okay with staff and not too bad on you know, the turnaround with my staff, but or the turnover rather, it's one of those things that you're always conscious of in the service industry. It's never easy in the service industry. Back home, it's the same thing. I mean, it's one of those jobs, it's a stepping stone to something else.
And what about the other practicality of a bar particularly? You got to get in stock. Now, 20 years ago, you couldn't get in foreign makes of alcohol here. Is it like any other country now? Can you get anything you want? Can you sell anything you want?
No, you can't get anything you want. It's got to be brought in. It's got to go through legal channels. It's also very difficult in China, I think.
Is the distribution market mature here?
No, the distribution market's very immature here. And so you get the big boys like Tiger and Heineken and things like that, and they're pretty good in Qingdao, of course. All the Chinese...
It's a local beer here in China.
All the Chinese,
the biggest seller.
The biggest, well, actually, the biggest is Snow by volume in the world. But, you know, for instance, a Qingdao or a Beijing beer or a Yanjing, like, that's no problem. When you get to some of the other ones that you're dealing with, the more exotic ones that come from the States or come from Belgium, then you hit supply problems because things will get held up at the borders, or who knows what happens, you know, along the way. It's a bureaucracy chain.
There is a well-known problem in China of counterfeiting. What about that? Is it likely that you might be selling counterfeit gin off the counter? Because
I don't, and I know that some bars actually employ that. They'll buy that cheaper bottle.
So you can, as an owner, you can tell you're not being fooled by somebody.
Well, occasionally you are, though. Even if you get it off the top guys with the best reputations, quite often what'll happen is an employee somewhere along the chain will pull out the real bottle, put in a fake bottle, and they won't do it with whole cases, but they'll do it with the occasional bottle. And it's really dangerous because this is not good alcohol, and you know you can have all kinds of problems if you overdo it on alcohol that shouldn't be like that. So it is a problem, but it's better than it used to be. I think now that both the Chinese and foreign customers, if they find out, they're very upset, and that can kill your business if you're doing that kind of practice. But anytime you see anything that, you know,
if you're getting
all you can drink for 50 kwai
cents,
for, you know, for 3 hours, trust me, you're getting fake alcohol.
Right. There's a big campaign going on against corruption here in China at the moment, from the government top down. Big people are going down every day. Has that filtered down to the level of people that you're dealing with?
No, not at all. At least not that I've seen. That you still have...
No change whatsoever?
You know, it can take out all the top guys you want, but really what they should have been doing is also concentrating on the people on the street, because no, there's not. Chengguan, you know, these guys act like they're royalty. They can do almost anything they want. Police they don't seem to care that much.
So just explain what their job, as far as they have other duties, but what do they do?
They work for the city, not so much, you know, they're not police, but they're sort of police. It's hard to explain. They carry these truncheons around. I have once, and I swear to God I saw this, lady was selling her stuff on the street, apples or oranges or something, and these guys came, and the Chengguan were taking away her vehicle, and she was holding on to her vehicle, a little bike thing, and not letting it go. And this guy walked up and punched this old lady right in the face. And nobody did a thing. And the other Chengguan sort of held him back, but he was going to give her a good licking. But I watched that with my own eyes. And I thought, well, it hasn't affected me because I'm hidden, you know, like I'm not right out on the street. I'm sort of within a community.
But for a regular bar owner, are they going to be dealing with these people on a daily basis? Is it once a month? Is there a shakedown, or is it just simply...
there's no shakedowns per se. Like, they don't come in and just like demand money or say it's not like protection rackets in the United States back in, you know, Prohibition times or anything like that.
No, which still exists in some places.
Well, it does, but it's not quite like that. It's a lot more subtle, or... You know, you just run into arguments with these guys, or, you know, I don't know, there's no accountability. That's the biggest problem, you know, that I've found, that if I've got to sort of deal with all of my problems individually, and there's nowhere to go for help. Does
your Chinese partner or manager not know where to go?
No, they know that it's better just to keep quiet and not do anything about it. Just let that happen, just chalk it up as a cost of business or whatever, and let it go.
Is there any sort of solidarity? Is there any sort of bar owners union? Do people come together to lobby? And if not, why not?
Well, again, you just don't want to draw too much attention to your establishment. If you do that, then you know that people will frown upon it that are in positions of power. It's best just to make your money and go about your business is basically the bottom line. And for me, it gets tiring, to be perfectly honest. I've been doing this now for quite some time, and you know, there is money to be made, which is the hard part. And you know, when you're making money, things are okay, but there's always those times when you're thinking, why do I do this? Like, is it really worth it? The other day, I had a guy drop off my cheese. I know they sound silly, but these are your profit margins. And instead of these great big bags of cheese I get for X amounts, a Chinese product, it's from Tianjin, he gave me a smaller bag that was twice as much money. And I said, well, why are you doing this? Oh, I'm out of that one, plus that one's not as good, this one's better. And I said, but I didn't order that. I want the cheese I ordered. And he just said, well, I don't have any. And I said, well, then I'll take away all of your stuff. I don't want any of your stuff. I'll get it from another supplier. Oh, no, wait, I do have it. Right after that, I went to buy more cheese at a different shop, and they tried to overcharge me again. And I went, why is it like this? Why does it have to be every day I have to struggle? It's imagine me.
Are these not frustrations, though, that a business owner in any country would come across at some stage? Right?
I don't know. I can't speak to that. All I know is that you wouldn't get that in Canada. You know, I can tell you won't get that. It's like me going, let's say you come down for a beer and a burger, and let's say the price for a burger and a brew is 60 kwai. And then when your bill comes, it's 90 kwai. And then you say, oh, what's this all about? And I'm like, oh, well, you know, we give you a bigger beef patty and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, it's just bait and switch. And you would be upset. And this is generally how I feel on a regular basis sometimes when I do this. And I wonder, why do I keep doing it, right? Like, and I know I should be happy because there's days here that I really love being here and that I really enjoy the business that I'm in, and I'm loving being my own boss, and we have great customers, both Chinese and foreign, and I really love my staff and things like that. So I know I shouldn't complain as much as I do. But
sounds like a barman's lament worldwide.
Yeah.
Let's look at the business a bit at a wider level all over Beijing now. Yours is sort of, it's not the biggest bar, it's not the smallest, so that's why I'm interested in talking to you and just seeing what the average does here. But do you see the business going in new directions here? As you said, it evolved from something very, very ad hoc to something which would be recognized by anybody. Where are we going now?
The biggest trend is that Chinese customers want higher quality. They've got a little more, they've got a few more shekels in their pocket. They want to go out and they want to have a better environment, better quality food, better cleanliness, better service. And this is where I'm seeing the industry go now. Like, I think
this is across the board now.
I wouldn't say necessarily across. There'll always be room for dives, but you'll even notice your dives are becoming a little bit nicer, you know, and they're being made to be a little more cleanly. And the Chinese consumer is demanding more, which I think is a very good thing. I think, you know, it's nothing but good things for the economy. You know, you're going to spend more on improving your place. People are going to pay a little bit more. It's a good thing culturally as well that, you know, things are moving in a positive direction.
How about going off in slightly different directions? This is a relatively new business here, so things that have happened in other countries may not have happened here. And I'm thinking now sort of niche businesses. We've obviously got the beginnings of a fairly robust, not homebrew, but brew pub industry going on here.
Craft beers, yeah.
Craft beers, and they're selling to other pubs and they're opening up their own places. But I'm thinking of things like, there are bars here where you can get your nails painted if that's what you want, as you have a beer. There's others where you can get your bicycle repaired in the shop itself. There's a sort of there was a trend towards these hidden away exotic cocktail bars. Is it moving off in different directions? Are people finding new areas to invest in and to take their business?
It's just a more sophisticated clientele that you're dealing with now, and people want things that are new and unusual. I basically do a lot of burgers. We're gourmet burgers, and we specialize in that, really.
So you're looking at a niche as well, to get away from the general.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have 1,000,001 things on my menu. We try and stick to what we do and what we do well. And if you want that sort of thing, you come to my place. But, you know, there's other bars in the area where if you want something else, a different kind of experience altogether, you go to them. Right now, it's not just a whole bunch of same sort of venues that are catering to the same group. I mean, now you're trying to figure out what that slice of pie you want is,
right,
and going after that.
So if there is this expansion, that would suggest that there's obviously more competition in the business. You mentioned earlier that you feel that there's a reduced number of foreign clients coming in. That's going to affect, in the long term, they may be replaced by Chinese, but that's going to affect the business. Is this a business for Mr. Smith that's growing, or is it something you would advise him to go into?
I would advise him to probably not go into it in Beijing unless you have a lot of money and you're going to go into one of those high yield like brew pubs markets. You look at the Great Leaps, the Slow Boats, and Jing's, and all these places.
These are some of the...
These are the ones that have sort of sprung up around town. Yeah, they're tap rooms. And, you know, there's a lot of money involved because once you get your stuff up and running, it costs nothing almost to brew beer. And if you can do it well, man, people come out and they'll pay a lot for a craft beer. Higher alcohol content. So the Chinese like that. It seems like they like the higher alcohol content, strong flavored beers. Like they really are getting into that.
We're talking prices here now that would be comparable to cities in the States and
more
and Europe.
so. You know, I was talking about this yesterday with one of my beer suppliers and some guys, and saying, you know, I think 40 kwai, 40 RMB, which is the equivalent of about $6.
$6 or so,
Yeah, and I would say that's about where I feel comfortable serving my beer at the most. My general draft is 30, which is about $5-6, you know, $5 say for a draft beer. That's not cheap back home. Like you can find it. You know, it's comparable. And then there's plenty of places now that want to sell you 50, 60, 70 kwai pints of beer. That's a lot of money. You're paying $11.
So are those... is there room for a lot of profit there? Because obviously staff costs are going to be lower.
Staff costs are definitely lower, and that's where that helps a bit. But your rents are so high now in Beijing and in China, I think, across the board. And this is one of those things that you have to really be careful. And this is why I tell Mr. Smith is don't go pay too much rent, because all you're doing is paying your landlord. You know, you're working for your landlord, and who wants to spend all those hours and, you know, years, you know, really slogging it through just to make this guy richer. Really, the point is that you get into it so you can make some money and have some fun.
The bar business, particularly the late night bar business, is problems arise, fights and things go on in bars that wouldn't happen in a restaurant at lunchtime. Is that something that's better or worse here? You've got a lot of expats who are here essentially with a lot of money and free time. It is better, you think?
I think it's better here than it is back home.
It's a safer business to work in.
It's a much safer business. Like I can leave my assistant, it's a young lady named Minnie, and I can leave her to close the bar at night. I mean, I'm close by, I just live upstairs. But she can close the bar, and generally there's no problem. Occasionally, I mean, anytime you add alcohol to any social situation, you have the potential for a problem when it comes to excess. So there's always that potential. But I have found that China is much better for violence and things like that in this industry.
Something else that happens in bars in certain areas of cities, drug dealing, that sort of thing, and nefarious activities tend to sort of gravitate towards bars. Anything like that happen in general across the city here? I'm not sort of asking you to admit what's happening.
No. At least at my place, because we're a local, you know, we're not big enough where you could be dealing drugs at all. Like it just, you don't even see it where I'm at. However, you get some of the bigger, younger, let's say that, younger clubs as well. Yeah, you're going to see that sort of thing. I mean, it's worldwide. Right. It's hard for that to sort of stop. And I wouldn't point the finger at anybody necessarily for that, because I've never seen any culture anywhere in all the countries I've been in that have been able to stop that from being pervasive in larger atmospheres.
A lot of countries around the world have banned smoking in their bars, and in theory China has done the same. But if you go into a lot of places, establishments here, you wouldn't guess that was the case.
No, you would not.
What do you see across the board, and what's your experience been with this?
Well, I started off with a smoking bar, and then I had a friend named John Coyle. He was sitting at the end of my bar one night, and he said he had a really bad headache. And I tried to give him some aspirin, and you know, he had one beer and a cup of coffee, I think, and then he went home and he died. And what happened was, he literally left my place, went home and died. And what happened was, he didn't realize he had lung cancer, which then moved into his spine, which then traveled to his brain, and that was it. And that day I went, that's it, we're not smoking.
This was specifically due to him having smoked?
Well, he was smoking, he had lung cancer, and he'd had his health check not 9 months earlier. And, you know, I just thought, what are we doing? Like, I'm not going to put my staff...
At that stage, people were smoking in the bar?
Yeah. And
was it legal at that stage, or...?
I think it was illegal at that stage,
right.
even, but everybody does
generally.
it. Yeah, everybody does it. So I went non-smoking. There's a whole bunch of prominent bars and restaurants around that are now non-smoking, and not just because but I was one of the first that sort of went in that direction. That was a personal choice. Even though it's illegal, I made it because it's not enforced anywhere else.
I know you've made your business here in Beijing, but are you aware of what the situation is like in what's called in China second, third, fourth tier cities? These are the cities that are sort of 5 years behind or 10 years behind in terms of development. Are people going out and opening up bars? Are people from these cities, or even Chinese people who've worked in Beijing, going back and setting up bar scenes in these unknown cities as far as most people are concerned?
You're seeing that much more now, and you're seeing foreigners going out and doing that more in some of these second and third tier cities because the opportunities are there because, again, the general population in these cities is becoming more sophisticated and they're looking for new experiences and things to do that aren't the norm. So you're seeing that happen more and more, and there's probably a lot more opportunity in those cities. You're not going to have your large foreign base that you have in those cities like Beijing and Shanghai has, but you are going to have more curious Chinese, and if you can establish that and sort of get in on the ground floor, there's quite a bit of money to be made in that.
And indeed, you're going to have people who are watching TV and films and seeing what happens, and like many lifestyle trends, something that's been adopted in the big cities first, goes to the smaller cities, becomes hugely popular there. And as you said, perhaps that's the place where Mr. Smith should go and set up his bar.
Well, it would probably be a good idea. You can also look at it as a training bar. Might be a little bit easier to get things done. I'm not sure because I've never set up a bar in these second tier cities, but maybe the rules are a little bit more relaxed, or maybe there's a little more leeway when it comes to pricing and things like this, and distribution. And if you do a good product, you could probably become quite popular and famous in these smaller markets, and then make your mistakes there before moving to some of the bigger places, which I didn't do. I made all my mistakes in a big market like Beijing, and kind of took a beating for a while. But, it works out in the end, thank God. But, I mean, there was times I remember thinking, woohoo, I'm making so much money. And then I'm like, uh-oh, I got nothing left in my bank account. So you kind of ride these waves when you make mistakes.
So you said that from what you can see, whatever the official figures say, you feel that there's a definite decline in the business. Certainly, is this something that other colleagues, bar owners that have mentioned to you as well? I
have talked to quite a few of them. They've also said that they've seen, it's not so much a decline, and again, it's hard for me to say a decline because I've actually seen increase in sales from year on year, but I think that's only because I became more established and
natural progression.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But really, I'm seeing fewer regular foreigners come around. I've talked to beer suppliers, and they're saying that their numbers are down by like 50%, some of them. And that's a big number. When you're down 50% as a beer supplier and that much, there's more competition for beer, so they are getting them from other sources, so that'll account for some of it. But the fact that they're saying all of them across the board are saying, oh gosh, our sales are down. That tells me that there's less foreigners at least.
You've said you see the industry in general naturally growing here in China and expanding perhaps into something else. Are you going to be here? Are you going to be part of that increase?
Probably.
Things are going well.
It all depends. Now I've also been around Southeast Asia and some other countries, and I think there's other opportunities that are springing up. Like I'm going on the 10th to Saigon, and Saigon, this will be my third time this year going to Saigon and trying to figure out if this is where I want to do business. Because, for instance, okay, I know a guy that's in relocation here, and he said back just even a few years ago in Beijing, it was 4-to-1 people moving in compared to people moving out. Right now he says it's 4-to-1 people moving out than moving in. Well, Saigon's the exact opposite. It's seeing that boom that Beijing and Shanghai saw years back because there's more manufacturing, there's higher end jobs, a lot of financial jobs. So I'm looking at guys that can afford to go out and that want to go out, and a culture that's really embracing nightlife and bars and restaurants.
And are you then sort of thinking, I can get in on the ground level, I can be in Saigon?
The ground level's already
Beijing
over.
was 10 years ago?
Yeah, the ground level's already over there, but it still hasn't gotten to the sophisticated level that I think I would like to go in. Like if you look at, say, Great Leap and Home Plate here, which are two well-known establishments, they took their games to the next level, and they were rewarded by people coming in, and they enjoy that atmosphere. It's cleaner, it's better, it's sophisticated, and even though it's simplistic in what they're serving, it's a quality organization. That's what I would like to bring to Shanghai, or sorry, Saigon, because I think it's very difficult to do that in Beijing.
Well, whether it's Saigon, Beijing, or somewhere else in the world, Trevor Metz, best of luck in serving up good drinks to people. Thanks for coming on The Level.
Oh, my pleasure, Fergus.